God in whom we live and move and have our being. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. I don't want to be upstaged by the recycle barrel. And I have my papers because I can never preach without paper. So, the delightful and insightful spiritual teacher Ram Dass always says, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a weekend with your family. Relationships can be challenging, and the closer they are, the more challenging they can be. In our book study last week, we were talking about Eckhart Tolle and his advice about spending time with your family. And he says that it's actually one of the greatest spiritual practices that we can have. And man, it does take practice to be loving under pressure, especially from those who are closest to us. We don't get to hear too much from the scriptures about the family of Jesus of Nazareth. But we do hear just enough to get a little bit confused. Some of us believe that Jesus' mother Mary was a virgin and always remained a virgin even after the birth of Jesus. That's just one of the many ways that the Christian tradition has tried to highlight the uniqueness and the specialness of Jesus the Christ. But there are references in the Bible to his family, including those who are called his brothers and sisters. So the language in translation is actually very ambiguous. People in that time and culture had very large, extended families. And the same words that are translated to indicate siblings could also be translated to indicate cousins or other relations. So, like many of the things we believe, it's entirely up to you. It really is entirely up to you. Whatever it is that encourages and supports and informs and upholds your relationship with God and with other people, that is what you should believe. That's what you should believe. Again, many in our corner of the Christian tradition have chosen to believe that Jesus was Mary's one and only child. But there is something a bit more natural and comforting about thinking that Jesus had brothers and sisters, right? I mean, because if I had to put up with them, why shouldn't he? Regardless of who these people are that we heard about in today's gospel, they are relatives of Jesus. And they seem to be slightly less than impressed with his public ministry. To the point where they're thinking, quote, he has gone out of his mind. That seems a little harsh, right? Or does it? So look, if you had a brother or a sister, or a cousin, for that matter, who was wandering around town saying and doing the things that Jesus is saying and doing, wouldn't you be concerned? Wouldn't you wonder about him a little bit? Seriously? Oh, hey, did you hear what our big brother just did now? He stormed into the temple in Jerusalem. The temple in Jerusalem. And he started throwing the furniture around. He threw out the money changers, and he started yelling at everyone about how they were desecrating his father's house. I can't believe they didn't kill him right then and there. Or how about, did you hear what cousin Jesus did this time? He got into another argument with the scribes and Pharisees. And he called them a bunch of hypocrites. He called them hypocrites, our religious leaders. He's going to get us all in trouble. It's not really that difficult to imagine that Jesus' relatives thought he was out of his mind. Is it? Really? It's not for me. And we all do have that relative too, don't we? Don't we? Like Billy Bush or Billy Carter. Why are they all named Billy? That's what I want to know. And I won't even go there with the current administration because I don't want to get anyone in the tiz. But you get my drift. We all have that relative somewhere in our family. So is it possible that Jesus was that relative in his family? I think it's a possibility. I'm not trying to be irreverent, as always. The only indication of the Holy Family that I can think of from my childhood, actually, are paintings of Jesus and and Joseph at home in Nazareth, right? And they're usually portrayed together in their home, with Joseph teaching Jesus some manly task, like woodworking, right, or carpentry. And Mary's in the background in the kitchen baking bread, or sewing clothes, or doing something like that. And that's lovely. But this seems much more real to me. It seems much more real. And maybe that's just because my family was a lot more like this than like those pretty pictures from Nazareth. Always remember that Jesus came to be one of us. He came to be one with us. And it doesn't get much more real than that. So if his relatives were a bit put out over his religious ramblings and public miracles and altercations with the authorities, I understand that. It makes a lot of sense to me because it's very real. It's very real. But the best part of this whole story is what Jesus has to say about it. Mark wrote, "Then his mother and his brothers came, and standing outside, they sent to Jesus and called him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, 'Your mother and your brothers and sisters are outside, asking for you.' And Jesus replied, 'Who are my mother and brothers?' And looking at those who sat around him, he said, 'Here are my mother and brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my mother and brother and sister.'" Jesus points it right back at us. We are his family. We are the brothers and sisters of Jesus. Here are my brothers and sisters. So, the question is, will we join his first century relatives in thinking that Jesus is crazy? Or will we join Jesus in living the will of God? It is our choice. And you know, there's just no accounting for families sometimes. There's no accounting for relatives. So maybe Jesus would actually agree with Ram Dass. Maybe even Jesus would say, if you think you're enlightened, go spend the weekend with your family.